I do have another Ben Shapiro video I want to watch. It's Ben Shapiro's top 5 tips, and the thumbnail is how to debate. Very interesting. Charisma on command. Yeah, I know that guy. He's made some alright videos, but anytime like Jordan Peterson is like the main topic he's talking about, it's like, really, dude? He's not good. He's just arguing against random college students. Ben Shapiro isn't a good debater. He's not good at debate. He's just really good at picking people that can't debate. He debates people that can't debate rather than debating people that are actually good at it. All right, let's get into this funny Ben video. It's funny Ben time.
I have a long history of debating.
You know the crowd is not with you.
I got that impression, yeah.
And
You think there's no systemic racism?
I believe that it depends on how you define systemic racism. When I debate, it's really not about tactics or tricks or anything like that. It really is more about trying to understand what the other person thinks and then critiquing what they think.
All right, well, first of all, I want to just address that first clip he said there. Well, the second clip. It's also something that Jordan Peterson does, where she asked him, do you believe that there is systemic racism? And he said, well, it depends how you define that. It's the exact same thing that Jordan Peterson does. It's avoiding the question. It's not a good debate. It's not a good way to debate. You're just avoiding the question. You're basically saying, I don't want to answer that, so I'm going to respond with an answer, I'm going to respond with a question instead of my answer. As Ben Shapiro doesn't think that there is systemic racism from what I've seen. It's just a weird way to answer questions, like answering with a question. It's kind of strange, especially in a case where it's either like, you know, if someone asks you, do you think there's systemic racism, your question, like, your answer is either going to be yes or no. It's not really a thing you can argue about. Well, no, it is something you can argue about, like the existence of it, but your answer is either going to be yes or no. You can't say, oh, maybe. Unless you're just not educated on it.
The same reason that Socrates had debates. The purpose is to elucidate ideas and bring ideas to the forefront.
This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Alrighty, folks, so we are here today to go through 5 rules for debate. I get asked about this a lot. What are some of the best tactics for debate? It's really not about tactics or tricks or anything like that. It really is more about trying to understand what the other person thinks and then critiquing what they think in a good faith way. That's the best way to do a discussion and a debate, actually.
Which he doesn't do. He doesn't do that. Ben Shapiro does not do that. If you watch any of his videos about like political topics, he does not just look at what they're saying and then critique it in a good faith way. He doesn't do that. He looks at what they're saying and then he basically tries to rip it apart. Very unsuccessfully, usually. But he's not critiquing what they're saying. He's just insulting it.
Number 1. You have to ask questions for clarification. It is very important to understand exactly what your opponent is offering. People speak shorthand with one another, and very often this means that they are really inexact in their definition. So, for example, you're talking to somebody, and they say, you're a climate denier. You're denying climate change. And you say to them, I need to understand exactly what you're claiming. Is a climate denier a person who says that there is no climate change happening, or is a climate denier a person who acknowledges that there is some climate change, but isn't sure how much of that is anthropogenic, right? How much of that is human caused, and also doesn't believe that the prescriptions that are being put out by the left are actively going to solve that problem, right? I need to know exactly what it is that you're making a claim about. This happens all the
Okay. Yeah. I see where he's coming from. I see the thought process here. And yeah, it's a good idea to ask someone to clarify what they're talking about in a debate if they're not exactly 100% exact. But the whole thing about climate change, it doesn't matter if you're someone, like, if I ask you, are you a climate change denier? You know, it's either yes or no. Again, it is either yes or no. It doesn't matter how you define it. Someone who acknowledges that it's happening, but there's nothing we can do to stop it. You're technically still a climate change denier because you're denying the idea that we're causing it, which is true. There is scientific evidence to prove, or at least to suggest, that we are causing climate change, or at least speeding it up. Also, climate change and global warming are 2 different things. I also want to put that out there for anyone that doesn't know that. Global warming is the idea that the entire Earth is just warming, and climate change is about like extreme weathers are getting worse. Extreme heats during the summer, extreme cold temperatures during the winters, all that kind of stuff. That's climate change. Global warming is the idea that everything's getting warmer, which is, it's not necessarily 100% true, but generally speaking, there are certain parts of it that are true, such as the fact that the ice in the ice caps, they are melting. They are getting considerably smaller. There are parts of like certain islands and whatever that have gone underwater because of the fact that the ice caps have melted slightly. Well, not slightly, they've melted quite considerably. But the only thing about the ice caps melting is ice is bigger than water. So when, let's say, for example, you get a centimeter cubed container of water, when you freeze it, it's going to be bigger than a centimeter cubed, just slightly, but it will be bigger. I think water is one of the few liquids that actually does that, which means if you're looking at the ice cubes, there's less, or ice cubes, the ice caps, there is less water there, less potential water there than there is actual ice. Global warming was the original definition. Climate change is an updated definition, as things aren't just getting warmer. The climate on Earth is changing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why if you say, like, do you believe in climate change, and someone says, no, global warming is a myth, then you can instantly say, well, no, they're different things, because global warming suggests that the Earth is just getting warmer, which isn't true.
When it comes to healthcare,
every other Western developed country does some version of single payer. It obviously can be done, and it is done at lower rates and better coverage.
so what is your ideal level of healthcare that is provided to everyone, and what sort of tax rate are you proposing to subsidize that? I'll say, well, I'm in favor of nationalized healthcare. It's okay. What kind of nationalized healthcare are we talking about? Like, are we going to be arguing about the British NHS system, or are we going to be arguing about Singapore, which is largely privatized? If they're talking about income inequality, you say, well, what is it that you're chiefly concerned about? Are you chiefly concerned?
Okay, listen, if anyone is in favor of, universal healthcare, generally speaking, the majority of the time, if someone is in favor of universal healthcare, they're in favor of completely non-private healthcare, where general healthcare is free or very low cost. A good example would be the Mr. Beast video that was put out recently. It's a good example of the fact that the healthcare is ridiculous. Not only in America, but especially in America. The fact that there were 1,000 people, like, easily found that needed surgery, a very quick, like, 10-minute surgery to completely fix their eyesight, and they couldn't afford it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't affordable for them. But as soon as someone else could pay for it, it was affordable again. And the thing is, with tax, it's not about increasing tax rates. It's about changing where the tax is currently going. Because in America, the majority of the tax goes towards the US Army, which is crazy. Why? The US Army is the most funded army in the world, and a lot of it is through tax, which is ridiculous. If that tax went towards the healthcare system, and the people at the top of the healthcare system didn't hoard all of their money and instead pay taxes as well, certain procedures would be available for free to the public because they would cost so little to actually do. The problem especially is that a lot of these procedures cost more for the patient than they actually cost for the hospitals or whatever to perform. The hospitals and the insurance companies and all of that, they are getting a huge profit. Specifically insurance companies, they got quite the profit. Not necessarily the hospitals. And it's that profit that, that's the problem. But yeah, people will claim that, like, the rich are already being taxed too much, which is crazy to say. And they're like, yeah, but look at this rate of tax that they have to pay. It's It's so high compared to the rate of tax that you have. It doesn't matter. They still have way too much money. You know, that's the problem. They're not earning an amount of money that correlates with the amount of work they're putting in. Like someone like Elon Musk, he does not put in enough work into anything to have the amount of money he has. And we saw what happens when he does try to put in effort into something. Twitter, you know? He didn't even want to buy Twitter. He bought Twitter because someone, I think it was someone like threatened to sue him if he didn't. I don't know the full story of that. But then he started like imposing his own rules, and he unbanned, I don't know what the word is, but he removed the suspensions on a lot of accounts that were suspended for good reasons, and advertisers said, yeah, we're not supporting that. And he lost advertisers, and Twitter lost like millions. And then of course he introduced Twitter Blue, which probably took about 10 minutes to come up with. That 10 minutes of work probably, I don't know, it didn't cost him anything in time, because he probably told someone else, we need to come up with a subscription, go. So he probably didn't even make any proper decisions, and he's getting the most money out of the subscription service. That's the, you know, the main problem with wealthy people is that the wealthy people are always going to be the wealthy ones in a company. If a wealthy person buys a company like Elon Musk, and they do a really, really bad job at running the company, and the company goes absolutely like the company itself goes technically bankrupt and can't run anymore, you know, Elon Musk still has money. Everyone else in the company now doesn't have a job, and they probably don't have that much money anymore. And the only person to blame for that in that situation is Elon Musk, because he bought the company and then decided to run it absolutely horrendously. And yet, for some reason, he still has the most money. He's like the richest person in the world, which is insane. Can you imagine how much more money we would be paid if employers actually paid the amount of money that they are able to pay employees, instead of focusing on how much profit they make? Yeah. I mean, there is more divide between classes than there are between different races at this point. There's a bigger divide between the poor and the rich than there are between, for example, black people and white people.
About some people being very rich and others being slightly less rich, and there could be a big gap? Or are you really worried about just poverty? Because that's sort of a different thing. When you ask questions for clarification, it allows you to find areas of agreement, because very often when you clarify, you agree. Or, alternatively, you actually see the real grounds of the disagreement, and that allows you to critique your opponent's argument better. Second, don't accept your opponent's characterization of you. So when people don't have a good argument, very often what they go to is calling you names. They'll say that you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a hater.
Caitlyn Jenner, I'll call him Caitlyn Jenner.
No,
because
it's
that's
her. You're not being polite to the pronoun.
Because
disrespectful.
Okay.
The proper response to that is not what people typically do. When somebody calls you a bigot or a hater or a racist or anything like that, very often your normal, natural human response is to say, I'm not those things. I'm not a bigot. I'm not a racist. Why would you do that? Why would you say that? That is not the proper response. Because you denying that you're a bigot means that they're a reasonable person calling you a bigot, which suggests that a reasonable person might think you're a bigot. If somebody calls you a bigot, you say, that's not true and you're an asshole.
Forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings.
That is the actual proper response to that, because they're attacking you as a human being.
For example, gender identity disorder, that's the DSM-4, bro. We use the DSM-5 now for psychologists to be able to talk about...
I literally cited the DSM-5 in the speech, and it's called gender dysphoria, which is
I
a term that I use throughout the speech, not gender
You
identity
sound like a
disorder,
bozo, bro. And you get no pussy, and you can't even make your wife wet, bro, so what's good?
They're deliberately avoiding discussing the issue.
That was good. I like that guy. The other thing as well is like that thing that was mentioned there about the whole Caitlyn Jenner thing and referring to Caitlyn Jenner as he. It takes like 2 seconds to go, oh, sorry. If someone, generally speaking, if someone calls you a bigot, there's probably a reason. You know, just think about it. Think about it for like a split second and go, oh, okay, maybe they're right. Yeah, maybe they're right. Specifically about like trans people, calling them by the pronouns that they want to go by isn't about respect. It's about being actually correct. Like if I was talking to someone who identified as a man, who was born as a man, who, you know, in every possible way is a man, and I say, no, you're a woman, I'm going to refer to you as she, I'm the one in the wrong. You understand? It's not about respect. Like me calling that dude she, it's not, I'm not disrespecting that person by using different pronouns. I just look like an idiot. I'm a fool for doing that. It's exactly the same. It's literally not about respect. It's just about whether or not you're actually right.
They're much more focused on going after you personally. It's a real misdirect, and it's where you can make big mistakes, right? I mean, the big mistake is to get your back up and to get offended, and that's the goal of this particular game. You shouldn't even entertain the premise.
It's not.
Third, don't get...
All right, it's not. First of all, if someone calls you a bigot, it's because like they think you're a bigot, and they're trying to address the fact that you're a bigot. They're trying to let you know the fact that you're a bigot. It's not you know, it's not to offend you. Oh, your text isn't even showing up now because like there's no drop shadow or anything on the chat. But yeah, if someone calls you a bigot, it's not because they want to offend you. It's because they're telling you you're a bigot. Just accept it, you know. Just accept it and move on.
distracted. Don't let your opponent change topics. So people on the left particularly like to shift the argument from one topic to another when they...
That is the funniest thing. The funniest thing I think Ben Shapiro has ever said. People on the left like to shift the argument. People on the left like to shift the argument between topics. It's absolutely not true. People on every side of this whole political thing, every single person does it. It's not something that people on the left do solely. I've seen Ben Shapiro do it. I've seen Jordan Peterson do it. Steven Crowder does it a lot. Certain other right-wing creators do it. It is absolutely not a left-wing thing. You know, people on the left do not do that. Just like they're not the only ones that do it. I'm not saying that there aren't people on the left that, you know, do that.
Topic to another when they are pressed on the argument. So here's an example of this.
Roy Teixeira just wrote a piece, the emerging Democrat majority, Roy Teixeira, he just wrote a piece about what he called the Fox News fallacy, a tendency of people on the left to believe that just because Fox News mentions something, it can't be real. The reality is, a lot of this stuff is taught in schools.
You mean like viruses? Well, okay.
Well,
Can I?
now I'm just...
I don't know.
Now I'm just...
You think that you are arguing about, for example, same-sex marriage and whether men should marry men and women should marry women and whether that is the moral and utilitarian equivalent of a man marrying a woman. And they immediately shift to, what about an old man marrying an old woman? Well, that's...
What? No one does that. He said about the like same-sex marriages. Well, what about old people? But like leftists don't do that. The common argument with leftists, from what I've seen, is when Ben Shapiro or any other right-wing talking head like this says that same-sex couples shouldn't be allowed to adopt because a child needs a mother and a father. That is a lie. That is just a straight-up lie. It's not true. There's been like many studies into it. Same-sex couples are just as able to raise a child. There's no actual evidence that a child will do worse when raised by a same-sex couple, despite what they tell you. That's the argument that is most talked about. And for some reason, a lot of the time people on the right will, instead of talking about the fact that same-sex couples and heterosexual couples will raise children exactly the same way, they talk about how single-parent households are bad, and that's why a child needs both a mother and a father. Obviously, yes, there are disadvantages to single-parent households, but that's not the conversation that we're having. You know what I mean? But unfortunately, it does seem to be a common way that people on the right justify their beliefs about same-sex couples and adoption.
Kind of a change of topic. That does not actually answer the question as to why a man and a man are the same thing as a man and a woman. That's actively moving the topic to another realm. Now, you can make the distinction, you can follow them there, but you should at least point out that this is no longer an argument over same-sex marriage. It's an argument of whether certain men and certain women should not be able to get married. It is not an argument in favor of men and men getting married. You'll be talking about the fact that the police do not disproportionately shoot and kill black men. And they'll immediately shift to, well, what about slavery? So, well, we can talk about slavery.
Once again, that's not the point that Ben Shapiro just made. Once again, it's like he's somehow coming up with a random, like, straw man thing to talk about. And people on the left are not going to immediately go, hey, but what about slavery? When you bring up the fact that there is police brutality and, it's more against black people than it is white people. Ben Shapiro is not particularly good at this. Leftists will not claim that. They're not going to go straight to racism back in, the 1800s. They're going to show you a study that shows you that there is racism within the police force or whatever it is. Or they'll tell you straight away, that's wrong. You're wrong, though. You're wrong, I can back it up, here's the evidence, there you go. It's kind of weird that Ben Shapiro is making up arguments on behalf of leftists.
We can talk about the root causes of crime, we can talk about all those things, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Sticking to the topic at hand before moving on to the next topic allows you to have a productive conversation. It is very, very important to protect your online privacy.
I'm also
with
never
the
going to be sponsored by ExpressVPN, by the way.
4, you have to point out contradictions in arguments that are brought about by your opponent's refusal to be clear.
I'm going to have a list at some point. I'm eventually going to have a list of just companies to reject sponsorships from. First one is True Classic Teas, because they sponsored Ben Shapiro. Second one is some life insurance thing. Third one right now is ExpressVPN. I will not accept a sponsorship from ExpressVPN if they ask.
In their definitions. This happens all the time. So people on the left very often will bring out an argument that is vague and that appears to be internally coherent, but when you actually drill down on the definitions, is totally incoherent. So this is particularly true in the arena of gender.
So here's my question. It's an argument that my friend Matt Walsh likes to make. What is a woman? Define what a woman is without reference to the word woman, please.
So this is actually a logical fallacy called a red herring. You're asking me a question in order to actually challenge my question without actually
No, it isn't. I'm saying
answering
that it really is not. I'm saying that biology...
They will not specifically define gender or sex, because the moment that they do...
I will answer his question right now. Okay. Let's say Ben Shapiro. I'm playing Ben Shapiro right now, and then I'm going to switch back to me, right? Mr. Actual Archer, how would you define a woman without using the word woman? Well, it's someone who defines themselves as that, someone who identifies that way, someone who internally feels that way. There you go. That's what a woman is. Because the common thing is someone who identifies as a woman. There you go. That's what a woman is. Someone who identifies as a woman, someone who internally feels as though they are a woman. But Ben Shapiro doesn't want you to say the word woman while defining it. So, I don't know, you could say someone who identifies as female. Someone who categorizes themselves as female. It's a very weird argument to say, yeah, but say it without saying woman. I don't like your argument, so say it without saying the word woman. This isn't the game, Ben Shapiro. We're not playing a game right now. We're having a debate. It's kind of weird.
It becomes clear that their definitions are completely contradictory. So they will say that gender is completely independent of sex. But at the same time,
yeah.
Gender is biological and sex is somehow assigned.
That's not
they'll
true
make
at
the
all.
claim.
He's missed the point. I've just knocked over something. But he's missed the point completely. That's not what anyone says.
Gender is biological and sex is somehow assigned.
That's not true. That's literally the opposite of what people on the left think. Gender is not based on biology. Sex, to a certain degree, is. It's pretty simple. I don't know how he confused himself on that. Gender is completely socially constructed. It's not real. It's a performance. We all pretend to be what we're told we have to be. You know? You can be biologically a male, but you can identify as female. Yeah, but to the same extent, someone who, you can be biologically not male or female. You can be born intersex. So, would you call that person male or female? And then you say, oh, well, it depends on their chromosomes. Well, men can be born with female chromosomes, and women can be born with male chromosomes. So how would you then figure out what their sex is? What, you wait till they're 18 and see if they grow a beard? Well, not all men grow beards. Oh, you test their testosterone levels once they go through puberty. Some women will have very high testosterone levels. In fact, some women actually grow full beards. To a certain extent, yes, sex is biological for, 99% of people. But by saying that it is absolutely based on biology makes it so that that 1% isn't as valid as the rest of society, which is kind of a weird thing to say. It's a weird take. Whereas gender is just completely social. I could very easily, if I shaved and I grew my hair a bit longer, put a bit of makeup on, and took a picture with, a nice filter or something on Snapchat, I could make it look like I'm a woman. And that's people do that on a day-to-day basis, where there are people. I mean, look at Finster, for example. He's a very good example of how gender is completely socially constructed, because you can see Finster and not, hear his voice, or not have ever seen him before, and you see a picture and you think, oh, that's a woman right there, isn't it? And then you hear his voice and you hear him say, no, actually, I'm a man, I'm just dressing the way I want to and putting makeup on. And immediately it's like, oh, okay, well, there you go. But it just goes to show that, gender is a social construct. It is completely socially constructed. And to the same extent, I'm not saying that trans people are pretending. I'm saying that everyone is. Every single person is pretending to be the gender that they were told to be. It's just easier to pretend to be your own gender, because that's what society wants. So it is just lack the mental capacity to understand the nuances of gender expression and gender identity. Exactly. Even I don't fully understand it. There are still things about it that I don't understand because I'm not educated enough, on the topic, which is the big problem with conservatives, is that they don't educate themselves at all on the topic and then try to argue against it as if they have. It can be very dangerous because it leads to a whole bunch of misinformation becoming information.
Or they'll make the claim that gender is more important than biological sex. And
it is.
Therefore, we should identify you by your self-identified gender and not by your
Yes.
biological sex. But also, there is sexism rooted in a belief in biological sex. Maybe my most famous argument, in sort of the Shapiro destroys category, is a conversation that I had with a college student in which she was claiming that you could change your gender. And I was saying, well, but you're saying that gender is biologically ingrained, so how can you change it? And she refused to be clear in her definition, so I brought an analog, and the analog was age.
Let me ask you this. How
What? I'm sorry, what has he just said? I need to...
By your self-identified gender and not by your biological sex, but also there is sexism rooted in a belief in biological sex.
Huh? My brain is fried. This happens every time I watch Ben Shapiro for too long. My mind is becoming... It's melting. There's nothing in here anymore. It's all gone. Oh, man. What?
Also, there is sexism rooted in identify you by your self-identified gender and not
Yes. So if someone has a gender and they introduce themselves with that particular gender, with particular pronouns, it is foolish, very silly, to then decide that actually that's not true. You're not that gender. I'm going to use the pronouns I want to use. Because, they'll make the argument that, if you're talking to a trans person, or if you're watching a video of a trans person or something that is well known and it's public information that they're trans, they'll pretend that, like, oh, well, you can tell if someone's trans, you can tell. Except for the fact that, a lot of trans people don't tell other people that they are trans. Let's say someone who transitions from female to male goes on hormone replacement therapy to increase the level of testosterone in their system. They grow facial hair, they have a short haircut, they look relatively masculine. If you meet them for the first time and you talk to them, you're not going to know that they're trans. So it's a bit weird to, to just randomly say, no, actually, I actually don't think you're actually a man, Why are you even saying that? What's the purpose of arguing against someone's gender? There isn't a purpose. Exactly. Yes, that is a good point. It is also very good point. It is not gay to find a trans woman attractive. If you think that, you are silly. The same thing, like, if you're a woman and you find a trans man attractive, your first thought shouldn't be, oh my god, that's actually a woman. Oh my god, I must be like a lesbian or something. It's like you find a man attractive. You are attracted to someone who has particularly masculine characteristics. I don't know, the whole trans debate with transphobes is certainly not a fun one, and very, very often is one that's like very easy to win, but they don't realize that you've won. Like, all you have to do is link a few studies and link a few, take a few screenshots of definitions, take a few pictures of dictionary definitions if you really want to, and there you go. You've proven them wrong. That is funny. Like, if you hear someone say, sometimes trans women are kind of hot, but I'm not gay, I swear. It's like, okay, well, you're not gay, but you're a transphobe. Anyway, let's get back into this. Ben Shapiro is still struggling to understand the fact that we do not think that gender is biological. We do not think gender is based in science at all. We actually think the exact opposite of that. For some reason, he refuses to understand
your
that
self-identified gender and not by your biological sex, but also there is sexism rooted in a belief in biological sex. Maybe my most famous argument in sort of the Shapiro destroys category is a conversation that I had with a college student in which she was claiming that you could change your gender.
Which you can, by the way. You shouldn't just change your gender, though. You shouldn't really just change it whenever you feel like. You should change it based on what you mentally and emotionally feel. If you truly think, yeah, I was born, technically born male with, I don't know, male characteristics or whatever, and you truly feel inside that you do not belong male, you shouldn't be male, you truly feel like you would be happier in life as a whole as a woman, you can fucking change it. You can do that. Just ask people to use different pronouns. Change your gender. If you can afford to, or if you want to, once you're certain, go for hormone replacement therapy, go for surgery, do all the things that you want to do. It's really as simple as, if you want to, go ahead. I don't see why anyone should stop you from doing something that only really affects you.
And I was saying, well, but you're saying that gender is biologically ingrained, so how can you change it? And she refused to.
That's the thing, by the way. What I'm saying is Ben Shapiro like fails to grasp the point. He said gender is biologically ingrained, which it's not, by the way. Gender is, it's social. Sex, to a certain degree, is biologically ingrained.
To be clear in her definition, so I brought in analog, and the analog was age.
Let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are, okay? Because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably young and naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60? Why aren't you 60? And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
It's not the same as gender. You can't just.
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender.
Fifth, don't get defensive.
What? He didn't make a point. He didn't actually make a point. What? Huh? He's just arguing against like a college student that isn't particularly good at debating. He also very easily showed like he contradicted one of his own tips. He actually contradicted one of his own tips. He said that like you shouldn't distract from the actual point of the debate. And he said, well, how old are you? Like, what's your age? Why can't you identify as a different age? It's because your age is based on the number of years you've been alive. And to get really pedantic here, some countries measure age differently. What? Yeah, that's true. Some countries, you're already 1 year old when you're born. When you take your first breath, you become 1. There are some countries that measure age like that. Technically, using age as an example is a really poor idea. In my opinion, using age as an example there is kind of silly. I think anyone should be able to identify as whatever they want, but they shouldn't expect others to also take part in that. What do you mean? If someone identifies a certain way, you shouldn't expect people to respect the fact that you identify like that. Is that what you mean? So like using pronouns? Okay. Here's an idea, right? I'll just throw it out there. If someone referred to me as she, would that be weird? Like if someone decided to, refer to me as a woman, would you think it's kind of strange that they're deciding to go against what I identify as? I mean, I identify as a man, obviously. So if someone started calling me a woman and identifying, referring to me as she, her, it would be kind of strange, right? I feel exactly the same way about someone who's trans. It's kind of strange if you don't use the pronouns that they would like you to use. You can't get mad at people for mistaking you. No. I'm not saying that you should, get mad at people. If someone, I believe the term is misgenders. If someone misgenders you, then that's perfectly fine. The first couple of times, I mean, yeah, obviously, like, if someone isn't aware of the fact that you don't identify the way that they think you do, I don't think you should get mad at them for that. But if I introduce myself to someone and say, yeah, my pronouns are, he, him, I identify as a man, and then they start referring to me as a woman, it would be, it would be weird. And they'd be wrong, because that's not what my gender is. And it's exactly the same way with, someone who's trans. If someone who is trans comes up to me and says, my pronouns are he, him, I identify as a man, that's my gender, I would feel really weird about referring to them as a woman and misgendering them. It would be very strange. Because I wouldn't do that to someone who's, cis, someone who is biologically, to a certain extent, born as a man. I'm not going to do that to them, so I don't see why I should do it to someone who's trans. I don't know, that's my take on it. But I do think if someone purposefully misgenders you multiple times, it is perfectly valid to get upset, especially, for trans people, because it's already such a massive struggle mentally to be trans and to have to deal with that. And sometimes trans people are actually, not accepted by family members and friends, and they become alienated from their close circles, and that can be very challenging to deal with mentally, and I don't think they need that kind of disrespect put on top of that. I think it can hurt quite a lot, and I do believe that it leads to mental health issues. I think the simplest way to go about it is, if you're not actually sure what someone's pronouns are, you should ask them. If you're doing it like by accident, then I don't think they should be mad at you. No. As long as they're aware that it's an accident. I think you should explain that to them. You should say, well, I find it hard to, remember or whatever. Very sorry that that's happening. I am trying. It takes time anyway. It takes time to adjust, I suppose. I also think that the people that want to identify as things like clown self and demon self, it's extreme. Oh, like neopronouns. Yeah. I mean, neopronouns, they are very new, so it is understandable to not understand it. I suppose the idea is, and anyone that uses neopronouns, generally speaking, is non-binary. Generally speaking, it's fairly safe. If someone uses neopronouns, it's safe to, instead of actually using their neopronouns, just using they, them. Because they, them is generally speaking, the most neutral pronoun that there is. If anyone gets offended at you for using they, them, that's ridiculous. So if someone does use neopronouns, I would suggest, if you're uncomfortable using the neopronouns, just using they, them. But again, like I said, they are new. They are kind of confusing. I get confused with neopronouns. Let's watch the rest of this.
Okay, this is the biggest one. So I tend to be pretty unflappable in debate. I tend to be pretty removed, but you can catch me on an off day. It's happened before. The most obvious example is that time that I was on the BBC.
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse. Now, Mr. Shapiro, we'll say goodbye.
I got so annoyed by the host reading me quote-unquote bad old tweets and me explaining it, that after 20 minutes of being badgered about it, I got up and I walked off. That was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I should have just sat there. I should have said, listen, you can read me bad old tweets all day long. I don't think it's productive, but I'm happy to discuss them. And getting defensive is the biggest mistake that you can make in a debate, because so much of it's attitudinal. So much of it's about how you look to the rest of the audience. And the truth is that body language matters, having an open affect when you're speaking, right? Using a tone of voice that doesn't appear to be aggressive. And this stuff is very important in debate. People tend to think that debate is about shouting down the other guy or being more angry than the other guy. That's not true. Debate, and discussion too, productive discussion, is about actually being open to the position of the other person, so much so that you're willing to internalize it, understand it, and then agree or disagree with that. When you do that, you can become a really, really good debater.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, that is actually a good point. Like I said as well, with the neopronouns, just use they, them. They, them has been used singularly to refer to people since, I think it was 1375. I mean, that's before we had the modern English language. So that's about 700 years of using they, them as a singular pronoun. Yeah, that's the end of that video. Yay. Oh, there's that charisma command guy you were talking about. This is fucking Jordan Peterson as well. Wait, real lawyer reacts to Better Call Saul, the Battery episode. Hey, that's interesting. Cool. Alright. What the fuck is this? Shut the fuck up, I don't care. That's a good take. I like that take. That take is going in my good takes gallery.